Representative Jasmine Crockett's recent speech during her swearing-in ceremony for the 119th Congress has reignited debates on political rhetoric, crime statistics, and voter allegiances. Her characterization of the Trump administration as evil, and her assertion that 80% of extreme crimes are committed by white supremacists, have drawn both support and criticism. These remarks, made in reference to groups such as the Oath Keepers, neo-Nazis, and Proud Boys, have prompted significant discourse regarding their accuracy and broader implications. This analysis delves into the context of her statements, the factual basis of her claims, and their political and societal consequences.
Y'all, it's getting real. It's been 8 days. 8 days, y'all. 8. And we were only in for 3 of them. It's been 8 days. And honestly, I don't know how else to describe this other than evil. It's evil that is literally sitting in the highest seat in the world. The idea that Head Start does not know whether or not they will have their funding, the idea that the Medicaid websites have gone down and gone dark. I'm trying to tell y'all that whatever we do going forward, we need to recognize that there is no such thing as perfection that is walking on this earth. And I think some of us got caught up. And because we didn't have our perfect candidates, some of us decided that we would stay home. Some of us decided that we couldn't talk to our friends and our kids and explain to them that you still love your spouses even though they're not perfect. Some of them just didn't fully understand the threat that existed. But I am here to tell you, not to make you fearful, that it's time to buckle up, Buttercup. Because they were allowed to divide us. They were allowed to make people who didn't necessarily understand or agree with trans folks say, well, never mind, I'm not going to vote. They were allowing those that said, well, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that doesn't include me, not realizing that if you are uniquely abled, or if you're a woman, or if you are from rural America, or if you're a veteran, all of these are categories that qualify under diversity, equity, and inclusion. Listen, I'm going to try to be uplifting, but I got to be real. We got to stick together. And even I appreciate y'all reelecting me. I'm sure I took some votes that somebody here got a problem with. Because no one is ever going to agree 100%. But as a baseline, in this country, we always had morality. We always had people that at least knew right from wrong. Right now, we are living in the upside down. They're complaining about the people that are trying to make sure that we can have food on our tables or make sure that we can have a roof over our head, while allowing those that went through due process and were absolutely convicted and absolutely given sentences, we're going to release them. And by the way, since I now serve on judiciary, my first hearing was immigration. And I know there's a lot of propaganda that's out there. But one of the things that I made clear is that it's not immigrants that are committing all the crimes. I get that you can find any random criminal in any race. I just want to be clear. But going out and finding one terrible situation and then taking a paintbrush and saying this applies to all of them is wrong. Let me make sure y'all got the facts. Most extreme crimes that take place in this country are committed by white supremacists. 80% of extreme crimes are committed by white supremacists in this country. Do you know who went up there on January 6th? White supremacists. This ain't me just telling you this. You can Google this if you don't believe, but it was the Oath Keepers. It was the neo-Nazis. It was the Proud Boys. They are all white supremacists. So while everybody said they voted based on the price of eggs, I got news for you. They're not going down no time soon. They've hit record highs. So for all your friends that's complaining, I need you to remind them that elections have consequences, and it's not just the presidential, because I'm going to make sure y'all know who all these mayors are and who all these city council folk are, because y'all need to make sure you're paying attention to what they doing too. I mean, but mine are good. Y'all good. All right, let me get back on message.
Crockett's speech extended beyond condemnation of Trump's administration, addressing voter disengagement in the 2024 election. She attributed voter apathy to dissatisfaction with the candidates and emphasized the necessity of uniting marginalized communities through diversity, equity, and inclusion (DI) initiatives. According to her, Trump-era policies systematically harmed vulnerable populations, and those who abstained from voting unwittingly facilitated these negative consequences. Her rhetoric suggested that political divisions were exacerbated by cultural debates over transgender rights, affirmative action, and systemic racism. She argued that such debates served as distractions from economic policies that disproportionately harmed lower-income and minority communities. Crockett contended that policies favoring corporate tax reductions over social programs furthered economic inequality, framing Trump's administration as prioritizing elite interests over broader societal well-being. Furthermore, she criticized conservative-led policy shifts that, in her view, undermined labor protections, limited access to health care, and exacerbated socioeconomic disparities. By portraying these issues as existential threats to historically marginalized groups, she sought to mobilize political action among those who felt disillusioned with electoral politics. Crockett's assertion that 80% of extreme crimes are committed by white supremacists has been met with skepticism, as no publicly available law enforcement data supports this claim. The FBI's 2019 crime report indicates that among the 7,964 arrests for murder or non-negligent manslaughter, 51% were black suspects, while 47% were white suspects. This data contradicts the broad claim that white supremacists are responsible for the overwhelming majority of extreme crimes. Critics argue that Crockett's statements, lacking corroborative statistical evidence, contribute to a misleading narrative that fuels polarization. Political analysts emphasize that crime statistics should be analyzed with nuance, distinguishing between politically motivated violence and general criminal activity. While far-right extremist groups have engaged in violent acts, there is no comprehensive study validating the 80% figure Crockett cited. Additionally, criminologists highlight that politically motivated violence is not exclusive to white nationalist groups. Extremist elements across various ideologies, including left-wing anarchist factions, have also engaged in acts of violence. Thus, attributing extremism predominantly to one political demographic oversimplifies a multifaceted issue. Crockett's remarks represent a broader trend in contemporary politics, where hyperbolic statements often overshadow nuanced discussion. This is not the first time her rhetoric has sparked controversy. In a December 2024 Vanity Fair interview, she accused Hispanic Trump voters of having a slave mentality, arguing that their political allegiance stemmed from internalized oppression. This statement was widely criticized as an overgeneralization and an unfair characterization of Latino voters. She has also attributed lower black male voter turnout for Vice President Kamala Harris to misogyny, further claiming that white women voters had failed both Hillary Clinton in 2016 and could potentially do the same to Harris. These remarks have been perceived as divisive, fostering resentment rather than coalition building within the Democratic Party. Moderate Democrats caution that such rhetoric risks alienating swing voters and weakening electoral coalitions. While strong political messaging can energize a base, excessive reliance on identity politics may inadvertently push centrist voters toward opposition parties. Political strategists warn that focusing on division rather than inclusivity can undermine the broader goal of electoral success. Political scientists argue that inflammatory rhetoric, regardless of ideological affiliation, has long-term consequences for democratic discourse. Mark Reynolds, a political analyst, notes, polarizing language alienates potential allies and deepens existing divisions. Effective leadership requires a capacity for dialogue, not just mobilization through condemnation. Experts in law enforcement and sociology emphasize the importance of distinguishing between hate groups and broader racial demographics when discussing crime. While white nationalist organizations pose a legitimate security threat, crime data alone does not substantiate broad claims regarding racial group culpability. FBI reports on hate crimes indicate that white nationalist violence is a concern, but it does not constitute the majority of violent crime in the United States. Historical precedents show that exaggerations in crime narratives, whether from the left or right, have led to policy overreactions, including mass surveillance and aggressive policing measures that disproportionately affect marginalized communities. The danger, analysts warn, lies in rhetoric that portrays political opponents as existential threats rather than as participants in a democratic process. Media influence and the amplification of divisive narratives. Crockett's speech has also prompted discussions about the role of media in shaping public perception. In an era dominated by digital news cycles and social media, incendiary remarks gain rapid traction, often without sufficient context or fact-checking. Media outlets, depending on their ideological leanings, may either amplify or refute such statements, further entrenching partisan divides. Political commentators argue that the responsibility lies not only with public officials, but also with journalists and news organizations. Ensuring accuracy in reporting and providing balanced analyses can help mitigate the spread of misleading narratives. Without rigorous fact-checking, political discourse risks becoming a battleground for soundbites rather than substantive policy discussions.